Mippo, you're awful EverQuest player, incapable of even rudimentary tactics. You would die to 3 ice comets in a row from a wizard as a class capable of channeling pumice/memming cancel magic. This last part I'm still laughing at. You would die as a hybrid to around 25 seconds of a wizard rooting and ice cometing 3 times by your own admission. Use this as evidence that casters needed to be nerfed, and somehow still manage to think of yourself as a good player. Of course, after dying in noob-tard ways, you would whine on the forums about how you're somehow not the legal-as god you seem to remember from live servers in ridiculous and hilariously inaccurate ways. You were shit on every time you played the box, shit on every time you tried to make up bullshit on the forums, and shit on here.
Because some of these people put their life into the box because they sucked on live EQ, and the box changed many of the game mechanics so that the game rewarded time invested as opposed to skill. Players who were the whipping boys on live servers now get a second chance to own after failing the first time around. Players like myself who actually dominated on live don't really care to invest the time to a shitty emulator. James was gilded with me and splorge on Valen. Now, James probably hates me enough that he would never admit I was one of the best PvPers on Valen, but ask James about how good Splorge was on Valen. Splorge played on the emulator and got killed numerous times and quit because he realized the exact same thing that I did. The emulator changed all of the game mechanics around to reward time invested, and skill barely played a factor on the server. I only posted on the forums to try to get them to fix their server so it would reward skill again, which was pointless, so I quit.
Reg did it big with us on VZTZ, P99, and Progression. He knew it was a piece of shit much more than you are aware. Keystone has done it bigger than you on live servers, and whooped asses on VZTZ, P99, and Progression. Lumi rated, PvP'd, and achieved more loots than you on VZTZ. Heaven's Mist does it big on the regular, and has no problem staying up for long periods of time pulling his weight. I'm thinking you just suck at EQ, bro.
Did you not read anything I just said? The server rewards time investment, not skill. I understand the fact that people can whoop ass on the emulator. My point is that it has to do with how much time they invest, not because they are good PvPers. You even make my point for me by saying Heaven's Mist does it big on the regular, and has no problem staying up for long periods of time pulling his weight. That's all that matters on that server. How much time you put in and how much gear you have. As well, which one of those players you just named dominated live PvP servers like myself, Splorge and Drizzline did. You're far less likely to find someone who actually dominated PvP on live servers playing on that shitty emulator because it doesn't reward skill. What's going to happen is they will initially lose in PvP because they got rooted or snared, realize it's fucking pointless because even if they put in the time to obtain gear and win in PvP it still wouldn't represent any skill whatsoever, and quit. For the same reason people quit any other game that doesn't reward skill. The only people who stick around in crappy games like that are the second-rate players who can't cut it in the popular, more skill-oriented games.
Mippo, you need to learn a very simple and valuable lesson about both EQ and life. I would put over $1,000 on the line that everyone here who berates you and doubts your skill at EQ does so not because you actually did suck at EQ PvP, but based simply on the fact that you speak so adamantly about said skill you claim to have. When they don't believe you, you just reach out for someone who might have seen you PvP back in the day, and expect them to actually back up your overinflated ego-driven story.
As far as talking shit goes, that will be your opinion. One of the main reasons my Ranger on Valen was so well known is because of the fact that everyone hated me and still couldn't kill me. I rarely ever died. Maybe once a month on that server despite having killed almost everyone that played there. I didn't join Afterlife until the middle of Lukeline after the content had been beaten. The first expansion I did with the guild was Planes of Power, and frankly Fires of Heaven is extremely lucky because there is absolutely no way in hell that guild would have beaten us to world firsts if I had joined Afterlife sooner. The only problem is that the game died down to WoW when I was hitting my groove, not only shooting off world firsts left and right with the guild, but also in the group content as well. Oh well, shit happens. If you're going to leave the game, you might as well leave on top, which thankfully I can say that I did. The losers get to play a gimped out emulator to try to relive the glory days when they couldn't compete.
It should be important to note that you were power leveled into the guild as a ranger because we had no rangers, not because you were good at the class, because you lied through your teeth about your credentials, and still along the way managed to do shit like lose one of my Ikishas because you got disarmed twice while your bags were full. Bravo, Mr. Pro.
Yeah, that happened while I was still leveling up and still new to PvP. Unfortunate, but what about the next 2 years where I was asked to become an officer in Profits, which I turned down because Alan was giving me all the best loot anyway due to the fact I was one of the strongest PvPers in the guild. In Planes of Power, Rangers were probably the most powerful class because they were the best class for kiting, which was required on the vast majority of boss encounters in that expansion. A large reason as to why we got so many world firsts is because of how effectively I was able to crowd control many mobs at once on most of the encounters, which left the vast majority of the guild to focus on the boss. For example, we crowd-controlled the mobs in the arena of Rallos with 2 to 3 people, whereas most guilds used 15 to 20. When you can free up that many players to stay on the boss due to superior kiting by the rangers, it made the difference between world firsts and where everyone else came in. The only mobs we were beaten to in the entire expansion were bugged and killed hours before us on the day they were patched. We had world firsts on 22 out of the 25 bosses or so in that expansion, so maybe the fact that most people didn't even realize the effectiveness of the ranger class is why everyone else was so far behind us.
Sweet Zambi Jesus, you are really fucking crazy.
Yes, but Afterlife was behind Fires of Heaven before I joined the guild and well ahead of Fires of Heaven after I joined the guild. You can chalk it up to coincidence all you want, but considering I helped develop a lot of the strategies and led the crowd control in the expansion, it might have had a little bit to do with the results. One might also point out the fact that Afterlife fell into mediocrity in World of Warcraft after I left the guild, another coincidence. Considering I was one of the most hated players in Afterlife, did you ever stop to think about why I was never kicked out of the guild?
So what you're saying is after being power leveled and being the best PvPer to ever grace EverQuest, Afterlife hit full badass status because you spread your vast knowledge to them and let your aura of pure awesome and courage to become the top guild. Damn son, I'd give you a high five, but I just don't hand those out. Give me something more.
Healing, tanking and DPS were not exactly hard in EverQuest. The majority of boss encounters in Planes of Power revolved around controlling a large amount of ads, meaning crowd controlling those ads was the hardest part of most of the fights. Rangers were the best class to do it due to all of their utility and primarily their high aggro, very quick casting snares, allowing them to aggro a lot of mobs simultaneously. Secondly, the majority of a guild's success in EverQuest was primarily based on leadership. True, you needed a core of players that could perform the main tasks on the fights, but what separated the top guilds was leadership. Fires of Heaven only beat Afterlife due to better leadership in quickly developing the proper strategies, not because they had better players. Afterlife had far better players, but the leadership was behind Furor in developing the proper strategy most of the time. I've grouped with quite a few Fires of Heaven's members and I have yet to see one worth a shit, meaning it's quite obvious their success was due to Furor. The fact is, it doesn't matter how good your players are if you are trying the wrong strategy. Back before WoW and videos explaining everything. So someone like myself who helped tremendously with the strategies and the crowd control is going to swing the results, just like a huge portion of Fires of Heaven's success was due to Furor. The fact of the matter is that the success of most guilds in equal linked to only a small handful of the players, with the vast majority of the guild being easily replaceable filler.
I personally know the man who gave Thought and his flunkies 99% of the strategies they used to progress. Spoiler alert, He wasn't even a part of your fucking server. That didn't stop them from coming back and begging him for his brilliant mind. God damn, I would sacrifice my newborn child if I could recover those chat logs somehow, just so I could shut you the fuck up once and for all. You didn't do a goddamn thing but rehash ideas already given to your guild by our tactician. That man had more endgame and counter knowledge in the tip of his dick than you've accumulated over 10 fucking years of your self-proclaimed top doggery. It must break your heart to know that it was just coincidence after all. Any sort of knowledge you think you brought to the table was nothing more than an afterthought. Pun intended, faggot.